Hello, hello, hello. This is the Keto Answers podcast. I am your host, Dr. Anthony Gustin, and joining me this week is Mark Sisson. Mark is one of the leading pioneers and one of the original people who was promoting and educating people about a paleo and primal diet and nutrition, and not only that, but lifestyle. His blog, Mark's Daily Apple, has been up for over 12 years and was actually one of the first things that I read when I was getting into this type of lifestyle maybe 8 to 10 years ago. In this chat, we talk about how Mark switched from doing chronic cardio for a long period of time to putting on 30 pounds of muscle mass by switching up his physical activity, to how he uses the ketogenic diet, which is actually a lot different from other people, and tons of different stuff. I mean, you're going to love it. This guy has been just a huge part of the community for such a long period of time and is so knowledgeable that his tricks and tips are things that I take very seriously. So tune in, and I hope you learn something. Before we get to the episode, I wanted to chat about our sponsor, Perfect Keto. Perfect Keto is all about making a ketogenic diet healthy and accessible. Whether you're reading all of our online guides or articles or enjoying Perfect Keto's exogenous ketones or any other keto-friendly products, everything you need to make keto work for you is at perfectketo.com. I know what you're thinking. Hey, aren't you the founder of Perfect Keto? Yep, that's right. And all of my insanely high standards have been put into making each and every product. My background as a functional medicine clinician helps me craft the cleanest and healthiest possible products and best information about a ketogenic diet. Head on over to perfectketo.com to learn anything you need to know about the ketogenic diet. And if you've never tried any of our products before, feel free to use the code KETOPODCAST for 20% off your first order. With that being said, let's get into the show. Mark, thanks for being on the show, man.
Hey, my pleasure.
So you moved to sunny Malibu, huh?
I moved to sunny Miami.
Ah, that's right. From Malibu.
From Malibu, yeah.
Yeah. How's it there?
Well, it's great. It's I love it. It's different. It's not better or worse. It's just different. I love Malibu, but I was housebound. Worked out of the house anytime I wanted to go to the gym or get a cup of coffee or go paddle or go swim or whatever. I had to get in my car to go do it. And I live in a central part of South Beach right now where I can walk anywhere. I don't even need a car. So it's a whole different experience for me. It's an urban experience. But I'm also walking 8 miles a day as a result. So it's all working out great.
Interesting. How do you track that?
Oh, I just, I don't track. I
didn't know if you had like a fancy Apple Watch or something.
I'm estimating it. Yeah, no. I don't do the quantified thing.
Gotcha. For the 4 people listening who probably don't know who you are, you want to give a little background about your spot in the space here?
Sure. Former endurance athlete, marathoner in the 70s and triathlete in the 80s. Trying to extract the greatest amount of human performance out of my body that I could, putting in a lot of miles, eating a lot of complex carbohydrates to fuel those miles, and trying to do all the right things according to the conventional wisdom of the time, and wound up getting injured and getting sick a lot, and discovering that not only was I training too much for my body type, but I was also eating the wrong foods, and a very highly inflammatory diet that was causing osteoarthritis, tendonitis, gastric upset, IBS, suppressed immune system, the whole thing. So kind of shut it all down in the early 1980s to kind of refocus on just achieving good health, and did a lot of research into performance and nutrition and ways in which I could be strong and lean and fit and happy and healthy and productive without a lot of sacrifice and misery, and enjoying certain types of foods. And it led me down the path of what became the Primal Blueprint, which is my version of the Paleo diet, if you will. It's a low-carb, real food eating strategy that has now really taken off. I started a blog, Mark's Daily Apple, 12 years ago, became one of the most popular blogs in that space, and have written several books titled The Primal Blueprint, a bunch of cookbooks under that same brand. And then most recently, I wrote the Keto Reset Diet, which became a New York Times bestseller in October of last year.
Yeah, so you kind of spearheaded a lot of the initial paleo movement, and you were ahead of the curve there. Was that just self-experiment that led you down that road, or what were the first things that kind of pushed you in that direction?
Yeah, it was totally evolution. I mean, I started with embracing healthy fats a long time ago. Started, eliminating what I knew to be pretty poor choices in terms of sugared beverages and sweets and candies and cookies and cakes and desserts and things like that. So some of that was pretty obvious even in retrospect. But then the evolution into more real food, into cutting carbs even more, looking into ways in which I could train the body to burn fat more efficiently by manipulating the diet. And so there was no real, I guess the one aha moment was about 18 years ago when I got rid of grains, and I realized that a lot of my arthritis issues and my IBS were a result of the grain consumption. So that was the real aha moment, the real epiphany when I thought, I'm really onto something here. This could be, since it's transformed my life so dramatically, maybe it could transform, millions, tens of millions of other lives.
And was that one of the first symptoms that you noticed was decreased, was the joint pain and the gut issues?
Yep. Within 30 days of eliminating grains, all that stuff went away.
Amazing. And were you still running marathons and competing at this time?
No, by then I'd long since been retired from competition, although I was still, very much in the space of wanting to be fit and kind of going to the gym on a regular basis and doing a sensible amount of training, not an inordinate amount of training, and was no longer competing, having been the victim of 200 endurance contests, and I'll use that term lightly, over a lifetime. I realized that at no point ever in any of those contests was I really ever having fun.
Right.
So I sort of rededicated my life to finding things that I could do that would be more fun. So I started playing ultimate frisbee. I started, I've been stand-up paddling for a long time. I snowboard. I do sort of fun activities as opposed to pain management activities like running and distance cycling.
Right. And so one of the things that I want to ask you about is how did your physical and body composition change when you change your eating style, as well as not running so much and going towards more of the things that you like to do? I mean, you're one of these guys that, you post photos sometimes where you look like infomercial products where it's like, oh, doctors hate him. I mean, it's incredible. You're super, super fit. I mean, was that the case your whole life, or did you have some pretty drastic changes when you made these adoptions?
I raced marathons at 138 pounds, and I weigh 168, sometimes 170 now. So I weigh 30 pounds more now than when I was a marathoner, and yet I have the same body fat. So, you do the math. Even when I was doing triathlons and I was getting a little bit more muscular in terms of my legs because of the cycling, I probably raced at 150 or 152 or something like that. So my not training so hard in terms of endurance allowed my body to retain muscle. If you're an endurance athlete, the more mass you carry, the more expensive it is in terms of trying to be efficient as a runner or even as a cyclist. And so you see a lot of these guys that are just really, skinny runners or skinny cyclists. At least they have a smaller body. So not training those miles allowed me to put on, some very useful upper body muscle, and allowed me to, be more effective at play in terms of, like I say, paddling. I mean, paddling is one of the greatest activities there is, and I wouldn't call it an aerobic activity. It's more of a core and weight training activity, but I can do it for an hour or an hour and a half, and it's all it's a full body exercise that still doesn't tear you up. So I've chosen my new pursuits. I sort of went from being an endurance athlete to, I guess you could say a strength and power athlete, although I wouldn't call myself, a strong, powerful guy, but I've focused more of my workouts on that and sprinting and sort of explosive stuff. So, I played 2 hours of Ultimate last night, and it's a pretty explosive game, and you need sprint speed to be able to do that. And I don't think I could have done that even when I was one of the top marathoners in the country, because I didn't have the chops. I didn't have the strength to be able to do explosive sprints. I was just, I was really good at going straight ahead for long periods of time. Right. And so that's a big difference.
Right. And so obviously, if you look at from nutritionally the way our bodies are designed to assimilate these real whole food sources, it's kind of the same thing with with ultimate frisbee and stand-up paddle are probably a little bit more appropriate in ancestral terms for movement than just running straight ahead for countless hours on end.
Yeah, I mean, even people say, well, we're born to run. Well, our ancestors who ran any amount of running didn't run on roads; they ran on trails, and there was lots of twists and turns and changes of direction. The hunter-gatherer societies that tracked and killed animals did it in a way that was energy conserving. So they would hike a little bit and then maybe sprint the tangent and bend over and listen to the ground or smell the spoor or whatever, or look at the tree branch. So they were sort of, it was a combination of using their endurance capabilities with their brain and mixing it up. I mean, it was even tracking an animal was more of a obstacle course, like a Spartan race, than it was a marathon. And then keep in mind that this was not something that our ancestors would choose to do on a daily basis. You'd hunt the beast, and then maybe that beast would last for a couple of days before you had to go out and do it again. There was no utility in doing it every single day and trying to stock up on beast meat because there was no way to store it. So, our ancestors sort of trained for life. Everything they did was contemplated to just make them better at surviving, versus the prototypical endurance athlete today who, just puts in inordinate amounts of miles, doing the same activity over and over again, maybe mixing the speed up a little bit, but still it's all kind of straight ahead. You don't see marathoners doing shuttle runs, or side to side movements, things like that, because it doesn't have any utility in a long distance race. So, I like to mimic what I perceive to be an ancestral movement pattern.
Right. And one of the things that when I was working with a lot of patients doing sports medicine stuff is that when they were running these really long distances and never taking a break, to me it's analogous. I mean, your joint goes through all these different planes of motion and your muscles control the joints through those motions. It's like if you were to open a door and basically open and close it within 1 inch of the hinge over and over and over 10,000, 30,000, 50,000 times every single day, that hinge is going to get creaky. And so same thing with running those long distances, and not mixing up and doing other things, you're not giving your body a chance to recover and adapt to the stress, and you're not taking it through its full range of motion. So no wonder you get atrophied and get a little bit smaller compared to what your genetic potential is.
No, for sure. And one of the things that's sort of interesting to me is, like, I just told you about my move from Malibu to Miami. And in Miami, I'm walking a lot. Like, I'm literally walking sometimes 6 or 8 miles a day on a daily basis. And now I'm starting to get piriformis issues because I never walked this much before, and I'm because I'm doing it every day. I gotta think back and go, oh, I gotta give myself an opportunity to recover from those long walks. I can't be doing this every day. Now I'm repeating the pattern I had when 30 years ago when I was a marathoner.
Is it something strict that you do with your movement routine as far as like, okay, Mondays are sprint days, Wednesdays are ultimate frisbee days, Fridays are paddle days, or is it kind of just fit it in when you can?
No, I fit it in when I can, but obviously I have the ultimate games are set. They're sort of, those are appointments that I have with other people. So, like we have a Sunday 5:00 p.m. game, and so I want to kind of work my entire week around being ready for that game. So the day after that game, I might not do much at all. I might stretch a little bit. 2 days later, I might go to the gym and do some upper body stuff. Cause I do go to the gym twice a week, and I do try to do some kind of, upper body, full range of motion, push-ups, pull-ups, dips, maybe some squats, lunges, things like that. I do that twice a week, and I try to give myself at least 72 hours in between those sessions. And then I kind of fill the other days in with either stand-up paddling, and that kind of I do that as I perceive myself to be ready, and also as the weather allows, right? So sometimes it's just not appropriate to go. It might be too windy or choppy to have fun. Other days it might be too cold. Whatever. Other days I just might not have time. It's like I do have a full-time job, and so I have to pay attention to that as well. And then I ride a life cycle in the gym. That's sort of my, God, it's kind of weird. I go to the gym to read, and I happen to be riding a bike when I'm reading. So I might get two sessions of, say, 40 minutes in using a math concept, which is 180 minus my age as the upper limit of the heart rate that I'm going to want to maintain. And if you've, I know you're probably familiar with that, but maybe your listeners aren't. The idea behind the maximum aerobic function test and that 180 minus your age as a upper limit on heart rate is the highest output that you can do and still be burning mostly fat. Mm-hmm. And the better you are at burning fat, the heart rate doesn't change. It just allows you to do more work, so you can go at a higher work output if you become really adept at burning fat. So it's kind of a cool method for getting some aerobic training in and not getting into that black hole of training where you could be going harder and you could rev your heart rate up substantially, but then it would kind of beat you up a little bit more and take longer to recover. So anyway, I do that twice a week, and I try to reserve my pleasure reading for when I'm on the bike. So I kind of joke that when I'm going to go to the gym to read a book, and just happen to do 40 minutes of aerobic cycling at the time.
So 180 minus your age, yours probably like a 150 or so.
Right. 180 minus 65 is 115, pal. And so because I'm good at this, I can hit 120, hold 120. There's obviously a 5-point variable there, depending on how long you've been doing this. Right.
And so we'll chat soon too about keto adaptation and using fat for fuel. But there's also a thing called respiratory quotient that basically you can do a test that shows how much fat you're burning through breathing out into a mask, and this changes drastically actually if you do adopt a ketogenic lifestyle. So I'm sure that's one of the things we'll dip into. But before we get there, I want to chat also about, you've always been a huge stickler for quality, and this is why I've really, really enjoyed everything that you've done. Has this been a thing from the start as well, or did you kind of find your way as far as, we should be eating real food, but the quality really, really matters, or was it just kind of like a duh moment from the beginning?
Yeah, it's. I think it's intuitive that we should be eating better quality food, and then the more you drill down into the science, and you realize that quality food and nutrient dense food, sort of provides the micronutrition in addition to the macronutrients that obviate the need to supplement heavily, for instance. So I've been even though I've been in the supplement business for 35 years, and I'm still a big fan of high potency supplementation in an anti-aging strategy, I'm more inclined to suggest that people who, that everybody get most of the good stuff from real food. And that means quality food. And so it's kind of like, grass-fed meat, pastured, cage-free, free range, line caught, whatever the term you want to use for your protein sources, and then healthy fats, avocado oil, butter, ghee, olive oil, again, the healthy fats from the animal sources, and then lots of vegetables. And I know we'll talk about this as we get into this, but even as a keto-based guy, I'm still a big fan of vegetables. I still eat I probably eat more vegetables when I'm keto than most vegetarians eat, because a lot of those guys are eating, pasta and bread and whole grains and other crap like that.
Yeah, and so like I mentioned before, you were one of the leading people in a paleo primal diet when that first started getting going, and then I noticed that you started putting out a lot of stuff about keto and ketogenic diet years before anyone else did either. So what was your drive towards that? And was it just a little bit more self-experimentation and figuring out what worked for you, and maybe you were at that kind of lower carbohydrate threshold already?
Yeah, it's what we call next level shit. It's like, I was great being primal and paleo, and I had all the muscle mass. Not all I needed, but all I, was willing to work to maintain. All the energy, never got sick. Hunger never really was an issue for me. But, I'd been doing enough research on keto and had enough friends who'd been spending long periods of time keto. And I thought, well, I'll just look into this. I'll do some experimentation myself. And So I did a 2-month full-on keto dive and thought, and saw some benefits. I dropped a little bit more body fat. I went from 9% to probably 7.5%. Was able to maintain muscle. Felt like I was actually putting on a little bit of muscle. Had more energy. Had really zero. I don't want to say zero appetite, but my appetite completely, self-regulated. And one of the revelations was, holy crap, we just eat too much food as a nation, and almost to a person, that I realized that I could get by on 30% fewer calories than I thought I needed, and not lose muscle, and not have a drop in energy, and have nothing change except I'm impacting the environment less because I'm eating fewer calories. So I had a lot of epiphanies there, and I thought, if I'd stayed primal the rest of my life, that would have been fine. But I'm a performance chaser. I'm always chasing sort of the next level of stuff. And so for me, the keto thing was an opportunity to refine what was already a good thing and enhance my metabolism. So I got my term in the last year is metabolic flexibility. So I've basically improved my metabolic flexibility and my metabolic efficiency as a result of this dive into keto. And so I would, I tell people, I'm not, again, we talked about quantified self and measurements and stuff like that. I don't measure my blood ketones ever, because it's too much work for me and I don't care anymore. And I did it long enough to realize that it was just sort of a parlor trick to begin with. I basically go off of how I feel. And so some days I will eat 20 grams of carbs. Some days I don't eat. Some days I eat 180 grams of carbs or 200 grams of carbs. And from one day to the next, I don't feel any difference. So that's the proof of the metabolic flexibility. That's the proof that my body will take any substrate that I offered up and burn it efficiently. And that's really what truly mimics, I think, the ancestral human experience, which is if you build this metabolic flexibility, then you don't have to stay keto just to be, proving to yourself that you can produce the ketones in the blood, and also, if you're metabolically flexible, you don't have to have those days where you go, oh my God, I had 106 grams of carbs today, and now I feel like crap, and now it's going to take me 2 days to get back into ketosis. That's not the point here. The point is to feel great. The point is to be metabolically flexible, and to be able to go from day to day with a change in macronutrient ratios and not have it negatively impact your life.
Right. And you make a good point that it's somewhat of a point of pride for people to have higher numbers on a ketone meter, which maybe if you're first getting into ketosis and you don't really know what it feels like and your body has never been in that state in your life, it's good to track that and to figure out where you are. Or obviously if you're treating some type of metabolic disease or if you have seizures, it actually makes a huge difference. But for the majority of people, like you're mentioning, you should really not be worrying about that. And also, again, if you look ancestrally, we're not going to be always in a ketogenic state for our entire lives. And if you look at the metabolic machinery, when you have to go from a carbohydrate high diet the whole amount of your life to a ketogenic diet, you actually have different metabolic machinery and different cell channels that need to be upregulated so you can actually take the ketones in and burn them as fuel. Well, if you keep doing that with fat and you go forever like that, you're going to do the same thing with carbohydrates. And like you said, then you're not going to be able to process those efficiently. So you're going to be stuck in this gray area the whole time. You said you go by how you feel a lot of the times. Is there any point in which you're either, you said maybe 20 grams, maybe 160. Is there some gray area that you've noticed in between where it's like you're not giving your body the right amount of fuel source, or any times where you don't feel great that okay, maybe I should limit carbs here, or maybe I should add more in?
It literally, it manifests itself as maybe a slight bias. I wouldn't call it a craving, but a bias toward a particular food that's in front of me. So depending on how I feel, I might say, you know what, I'm going to have a big piece of steak right now and be fine. Or I might say, I'm going to have a handful of these Mary's Gone crackers. It's kind of like I don't really even pay attention to it, because as you were just saying, I mean, I did the work. I've done, and I continue to do the work. I continue to refine the metabolic machinery. I build the metabolic machinery to be great at burning fat, and to be efficient at putting through carbohydrate too. Now, what I don't do is I won't go do a carb bomb of 200 grams of sugar in the form of a giant piece of dessert. I just know that's just gonna make me feel like crap for a long period of time. So it's not like I have this ability to just that the machine will burn anything. I'm just being a little bit more open-minded as to what sorts of foods I can eat based on how I feel during the day and based on what's available at the, if I go to a restaurant or if I go to a friend's house, or if I'm, scrounging around in my own pantry. I'm just not that, so dialed in that, oh my God, there's nothing to eat that fits my particular macro strategy. I'm pretty, open-ended in that regard.
Right. One of the things that I've noticed personally with going with intuition is that when I feel physically weaker or fatigued, like my muscles or my tissues, then I bump up the carbohydrates and I do some sweet potatoes or some plantains, something like that. And if I feel mentally fatigued or not as sharp, well, then I really increase the fat and get back into ketosis. And those are signs for me that I've adopted to shuttle in to the right metabolic fuel. And that seems to be working pretty well for me. Have you ever experienced anything like that?
Totally. That's exactly what I'm talking about. So yeah, I mean, I might say, think to myself, geez, I feel like going to the gym. And by the way, I live in a building where there's a gym in the building at the bottom floor. So I can just take a break and go downstairs and, bang off a bunch of, whatever, dips or pull-ups on the pull-up machine or whatever. And, I might suggest in advance, that I might have I make a collagen supplement, and I'm big on supplementing collagen now. We can talk about what that looks like as well. But my concern at my age is injury to tendons and ligaments and connective tissue, not so much muscle growth or muscle injury. And so I supplement with collagen. So I might put a little potion together that might have some collagen in it, maybe a little some carbs, and maybe even some like some vitamin C, and maybe some creatine. And I'll do that half hour before I head down to the gym, and then feel like I'm fueling that workout specifically, and not doing so in a way that's going to negatively impact my fat metabolism. On the other hand, if I go to the gym and I'm going to ride the bike, I'll absolutely do that fasted every time. Because I'm not maxing my heart rate out on those particular rides. I'm actually going at the maximum aerobic capacity. I will purposely, not consume any carbs for, well, probably since the day before that workout.
As you time it like this, I'm sure you've seen a lot of studies are rolling in that say if you take collagen before a workout, you actually increase synthesis of that collagen into your tissues far more than you would after a workout. There's been a bunch of different studies now showing this, which I find fascinating, because the bro science throughout all of history has said that, protein load and smash protein after a workout because your muscles are all broken up. I actually find that I perform better and recover best if I do the same thing that you do. I do actually creatine and collagen before a workout, and maybe a little bit of MCT oil powder, depending on the type of workout. And then I wait maybe an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours after my workout, especially if it's a hard one, to eat. And I notice surges in my growth hormone and in positive changes in my testosterone when I do it that way, versus if I have a giant meal after a workout.
Well, first of all, I'm not hungry after a workout. And that's one of the things that I noticed from being keto was, and when you talk about that hunger mechanism, if you're a sugar burner and you do a hard glycolytic workout, you're just famished after a workout. And that's your brain and your body telling you got to go replenish those carbs, because you might have to do this again tomorrow. But when you become good at burning fat, when you become fat adapted and keto adapted, hunger, like the last thing I want to do after a workout is eat. It makes me think, almost sick to my stomach. Like, why would I want to eat right after a workout? So same thing. I don't eat for probably 2 or 3 hours after a workout. Mostly just, and that's not intentional. It's just that typically I get up early in the morning and I have a cup of coffee, and that's my start to the day. And then I get some work done. I might go to the gym at 9:30 or 10, get home 10:30 or 11, and then not eat till 1 or 1:30. So that's just my routine. That point you made about the collagen, yeah, that's the research is really very compelling, and it's really cool because you think, well, I'm taking collagen because I want to provide the raw materials that my body needs to repair the tendons, the ligaments, the cartilage, the fascia, the connective tissue, not to mention skin, hair, and nails, and we don't normally get a lot of those raw materials in a regular diet. We did as ancestrally, we were eating all the parts of the animal, so that allowed us to get those collagen peptides. But that's the reason that we now supplement with a collagen supplement, is to provide those raw materials. And because the tendons and the ligaments and the cartilage don't have much of a blood supply, there's no way to get those nutrients to those tissues other than to bathe the tissue in the nutrients during a workout. So as you say, you take it a half hour before the workout, and at least the collagen peptides are in your bloodstream. So for me, it's like my Achilles tendon is my weak spot. And I'm trying to, do what I can to support the strength and mobility and flexibility and pliability of that. And so there is a blood supply that surrounds the Achilles, but not one that really permeates it. And so if you at least take this supplement before a workout and then do whatever it is you're doing, I know you've seen the studies. Some of them are pretty elegant, where they labeled the collagen, and then they had guys do 6 minutes of jumping rope, and they saw the uptake, and it was pretty impressive. So that's the reason for doing this pre-workout drink, at least in my case, and I guess that's in your case as well, and also the reason why it just doesn't make much sense to do anything post-workout.
Right. And so when you're doing the meal, let's say 2-3 hours after the workout, what does that typically look like for you?
So I'm just a big salad guy. So I make a big ass salad. It might have mixed greens, radicchio, arugula, carrots, a little bit of celery, certainly some avocado slices, some nuts, and then some form of some protein, either some chicken from the night before or some tuna or something like that. So it might have 25, 30 grams of protein on it. And then I douse it with some Primal Kitchen salad dressing. I make these salad dressings because this sort of food didn't exist until we started creating these a few years ago. And that, what I'm talking about are dressings that you could put on a salad and not feel guilty for having overdressed your salad. So the dressings that we make for Primal Kitchen are based on avocado oil as the only oil in the dressing. That's the most, I think, the most beneficial oil that one can consume is avocado oil, not just because it's got this high monounsaturated fat content, but because some research has shown that if you put it on a salad, it enhances the absorption of the micronutrients in it as well. So I make this big salad, and it's got all these greens in it. And if you do the math on the macros of that salad, you'll find that there's 25 or 30 grams of protein, there's 25 or 30 grams of fat, and there's probably like 17 to 20 net grams of carbs, because all the carbs in the salad are locked up in a fibrous matrix. They're in these vegetables. So it's not just that there's minimal amounts of carbs. They're also very low glycemic index carbs. In other words, they sort of enter the bloodstream very slowly. And as a result, this becomes a very keto meal, like very keto. And it's kind of interesting because I talk to people who say, well, I do that, Mark, but I don't eat meat. I'm a vegetarian. I say, well, then don't put the meat on it. And it's still a keto meal, right, because you're still getting 25 or 30 grams of fat and minimal amounts of carbs and all the micronutrients and all the fiber. Because don't forget, we still want to provide, even when we're keto, we want to provide our body with the substrate that our microbiome needs to produce all those wonderful short-chain fatty acids and neurotransmitter precursors and everything else that microbiome does. So it's important in my case to kind of, I like to encourage people to have at least one salad a day. Not just even if you're keto, but especially if you're keto.
Right. I think that's a really good point. And bringing it back to when you guys launched these lines of salad dressings, like I was super stoked about it. I, for one, feel way better when I use avocado oil over olive oil. I just feel like there's some brands that I like Castrinos is really good, but I feel like olive oil can get rancid way more quick than avocado oil will. So like if I don't use the olive oil right away, I feel some effects from it if it's like maybe a month or two and the bottle's been open, whereas avocado oil stays more stable. In my opinion, that's what I've experienced. And so when you guys launched this stuff, I was super, super pumped about it, because one of the biggest things too is that when people reach for things like this, and let's say they're trying to do a ketogenic diet, one of the things that drives me nuts the most, and you as well from what I read from your book, is that people don't focus on quality. And so let's say they post something on Instagram, #keto, but it's really awful and shitty quality of oils. For instance, like a vegetable oil, like a typical polyunsaturated fat. Can you just give us a quick rundown of, again, avocado oil is very, very different from this, but when people reach for, let's say, a salad dressing that is maybe cheaper next year as in a grocery aisle, what are they doing to their body that avocado oil is not doing?
Well, most of the common salad dressings, and certainly the ones that I had been using my whole life, are made with, and typically the ingredient statement will say may contain, one or more of the following: soybean oil, corn oil, canola oil, cottonseed oil, whatever. And they do that because it depends. They don't commit on the label because whatever was the cheapest oil that was available when they did that run was what they used. These oils are typically highly processed. They're highly chemically processed. They're high in polyunsaturated fatty acid, particularly omega-6, which are sort of pro-inflammatory, the pro-inflammatory version of the omegas. And that's one of the things that I've been talking about for 20 years. When you clean up your diet, one of the first things you want to get rid of is these industrial seed oils, these oils that are, again, the corn oil, the soybean oil, the canola, things like that. So when we talk about, how can I make a healthy salad dressing? I tried for the longest time. I mean, even, my childhood idol, Paul Newman, with Newman's Own, you pick up the bottle and it says extra virgin olive oil. And I go, oh, that's great. It's got extra virgin olive oil in it. And then you look at the label, and that's like the third oil after canola and soybean and everything else. So we just set about to create the sort of a dressing that the more you put on your salad, literally, the better it became for you. The healthier the fats, these heart healthy monounsaturated fats that are in avocado oil are what we're kind of all seeking when we talk about healthy fats.
Right. And you're talking about tracer studies with collagen being uptaken through in around the Achilles after working out. They've done the same thing with fats in cellular membrane. So your cell is made of phospholipid bilayer, so it's made of fats. And so you want this big and buoyant so it can receive signals and put things in and out of the cell. And these bad fats that you have from the vegetable oils can sit in your cell for up to 2 years. 2 years.
Yeah.
And so every meal you have where you have a bad fat or a low quality fat, you have to live with that meal for 2 years. I mean, it's ridiculous.
That's a pretty daunting thought.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is why I'm not a huge fan of like these crazy cheat meals, like you were saying before, like dousing yourself with a 200 gram carbohydrate bomb of some sugary dessert with probably a bunch of vegetable oil in it. Like that will impact you at some level eventually. And so, you guys have obviously the salad dressings, and you talked about the collagen. Is that a big emphasis for you guys? Is just getting that? And you said that you're a huge fan of supplementing towards it. I just think it's super hard to get because of our food system nowadays. Like you can't go buy tons of things that are collagen rich.
No, I mean, it's also the reason that bone broth has become such a big surging industry within the natural food space. There's probably 30 bone broth companies right now. Yeah. And I think the acceptance of the marketplace to bone broth is that it's a good source of collagen. I don't mind bone broth, a warm cup of bone broth on a cold winter day, but again, I'm living in Miami right now where it's 83 degrees out, and I'm not going to reach for a cup of bone broth at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm going to reach for something that's a cold, tasty drink. So we make a chocolate and a vanilla flavored collagen supplement. Again, it's natural cacao in the chocolate. It's natural vanilla extract in the vanilla. So it's a very clean product. It mixes easily with water, tastes great. And because I've been, in the supplement industry for a long time, I realized early on that compliance is a big issue. Like you might come across an amazing green drink that has all of these wonderful greens in it, but it tastes like crap. It's like, okay, are you really going to consume that every day? You want something that tastes good, that's going to invite you to consume it on a regular basis. Our vanilla collagen fuel has become a sort of go-to coffee creamer for a lot of people. It's a way to get 10 grams of collagen into a cup of coffee first thing in the morning. So, we sort of look at ways in which we can enhance people's lives and make the food, because our number one sort of priority is it must taste great, right? It's got to be great tasting in order to invite people to want to use it in the first place. Right. But close second is it has to have all the ingredients in alignment.
Yeah, I think one of the things too that I did as a keto snack, and just to be clear, Primal Kitchen does not sponsor this podcast. I was not paid to say this, but one of the things, we had a bunch of you guys' products at our office, and I would just take leaves of kale, like a giant thing of kale, this one little leaf, and I would fold it up, and I would dip it into the Chipotle lime mayo.
Yeah.
And just eat that as a snack.
Yeah.
Again, incredible. And you make a good point too, and this is what we always try to do, is it has to taste good. Like if people aren't psyched to eat it, then it's completely ruined. Like there's no point in making it. So good work on that. And then this also kind of brings me back to the point of your keto reset diet. I mean, the same thing that I tell people. So we have a huge Facebook community group, and I get emails and questions all the time of, I'm trying keto, but this isn't working. This isn't working. This isn't working. Can you help me? And my first question is, are you eating real food? Mm-hmm. And generally the answer is no. And so I said, okay, start there, work on that step, and then switch to a ketogenic diet. And so can you chat a little bit about your approach to your keto reset diet and how it pretty much is that exact same thing, but in even more formulated direction?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I wrote the keto reset diet because I saw too many people trying to go keto and failing. And they did so probably based on, old Atkins information, and Atkins, the guy was onto something. He just, the idea was great. The execution was a little bit faulty. And a lot of it was same thing. They were using, everybody was allowed to be consuming crappy oils and then encouraged to go into this induction phase and go from, God knows, 350, 400 grams of carbs a day down to 20 grams of carbs a day. And it was just too much for most people. Some people could will their way through it, but most people were just made miserable by it. So the keto reset diet is, first of all, a kinder, gentler way of getting into ketosis. It's a stair-step approach where we basically, for the first 3 weeks, we just have you go primal. And going primal means eliminating the things that we know you need to eliminate, eliminating the pies, the cakes, the crackers, the cookies, the candies, the sweetened beverages, the processed and refined grains, and coming down to meat, fish, fowl, eggs, nuts, seeds, vegetables, a little bit of fruit. And that's pretty obvious. That's the way we ate for millions of years. So it's not some huge leap of faith that's going to be a healthier way to eat. So after 3 weeks of doing this and eliminating the industrial seed oils and eliminating the sugars, we have a self-test halfway through the book, which is basically, how do you feel when you wake up in the morning? Can you go for a couple of hours without having to eat breakfast? Can you go to the gym and do a workout and not feel ravenous after the workout? Can you go for a long walk and not feel when you get back like you need to cram carbs down your gullet? How's your sleep? And when you answer these things, and when you get a 75 or higher score on the test, it's kind of proof that you are burning fat, that you're actually becoming good at burning fat, and now you earn the right to go keto. And in going keto, all we're doing is finding I don't know, 40 or 50 more grams of carbs a day that you're going to eliminate on a regular basis to get you into this point where you're making ketones and you're building the metabolic machinery. You're increasing the amount of mitochondria and the efficiency of those mitochondria. You're upregulating the enzyme systems that take fat out of storage and deliver it to the muscles. We figure that 6 weeks is an appropriate amount of look, you get the benefits within the first 3 weeks of being keto. You get probably 80% of the benefits. But then yet another 10% over the next 3 weeks. So 6 weeks in a keto gives you 90% of those benefits where you're building all this metabolic machinery. It's going to last you for a while. So even if you decide you don't want to stay in ketosis or stay keto, as long as you don't go back to having 200, 300, 400 grams of carbs a day, you retain that machinery and you become metabolically flexible and metabolically efficient. All of which, helps with your energy levels throughout the day, the retaining of muscle mass, the support of the immune system, possibly even some anti-aging benefits.
Yeah, I think the approach of getting people on a real food diet first is more foundational and impactful for the rest of people's lives than figuring out how to use fat for fuel and use the traditional ketogenic diet. Is this something that you've noticed working with people as well? That you said, because you guys have a coaching, do you have a coaching certification as well, where you have a lot of people working one-on-one? And what are the learnings that you're finding there? Is that kind of what you put into this book?
Yeah, well, as I said, I've been preaching Primal for 15 years, and there are millions of people who have gone Primal, who have, cut their carbs down to, say 100 to 150 grams of carbs a day. And in so doing, they feel great. They feel awesome. So there's no real, I wouldn't suggest that, well, you're not doing it right because unless you're keto, you haven't fully experienced what it means to be human. I would just say that keto is the next level of performance. So for people who have, maybe plateaued trying the Paleo Primal way and cutting carbs somewhat, for people who maybe have still have insulin resistance issues, for people who want to improve performance in their endurance efforts, all of those things are available if you want to just spend a little bit of time experimenting in this ketosis zone, where you are once again kind of forcing your body to go an extra step to build more mitochondria, to make those mitochondria more efficient, to become better at burning fat throughout the day, not just when you're sitting around, but actually when you're actually doing, reasonably involved activities.
Right. And so you said keto is kind of the next step after the foundation of eating real food. Do you think there are any next steps that you're seeing after keto as far as really honing in after that, really top of the mountain?
Well, I do. I think that the next breakthroughs in endurance performance will happen with long-term keto-adapted athletes who are maybe supplementing with ketone salts or supplements during ketone ester salts during the events. So they're really tapping into this metabolic flexibility that allows them to extract great amounts of energy and output through the burning of fat, and then offset the need for glycogen or glucose by consuming ketone salts or ketone supplements during an actual event, and doing so in a way that's metered, dripped in over time.
Yeah, I think
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think we're just at the beginning of really figuring out how supplementation in that front can really impact performance. And the question I ask is will this become a banned substance at some point?
No. I don't think so. It's like saying that was like in the early days, thinking that Gatorade would become a banned substance because you were supplementing with glucose during an event. If they were going to, I was in the anti-doping movement for 20 years. I actually wrote the anti-doping rules for the sport of triathlon, and I always looked at where the line was. What would you allow to be sort of legal and what was illegal. Clearly, not even clearly, but there was the line was, if you're taking steroids for a strength event, that's probably not appropriate and should not be allowed. But in cycling, for instance, 2 cups of coffee was legal, but 8 cups was illegal.
Right.
So there's a cutoff. And it's kind of interesting how sometimes that cutoff was made a little bit arbitrary. But going back to that first concept that, well, maybe taking glucose in the form of Gatorade during a marathon, ought not to be allowed because it's a performance enhancing substance, right? It keeps you, it allows you to keep going throughout the next, 10K or whatever. I don't think they'll ever, I can't imagine that they would, disallow ketone supplements in a race.
Right. Interesting times indeed, Mark.
For sure.
Appreciate the time. I know you're a busy guy, so I'm going to let you go. Can you just give us where people can find you?
Well, sure. marksdailyapple.com is my blog, 12 years now. Primalblueprint.com and primalkitchen.com is where you can go to find out about our products. The book is The Keto Reset Diet. It's on Amazon. It's at where all books are sold. And encourage people to dig a little bit deeper and explore this whole keto world.
All right. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Keto Answers podcast. I hope you enjoyed it, but even if you didn't, I would love a review. Just go over to iTunes, wherever you listen to your podcasts, and pop in a review so we can get found by more people, get better guests, and have the information that you need. So please go to iTunes, wherever you listen to your podcasts, and leave us a review. And if you're new to keto, head on over to perfectketo.com/podcast and enter your email for all our top tips and guides on getting started with the ketogenic diet. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.